6 months later.
The wedding was not held in a grand cathedral or a stuffy ballroom. It was held in a garden halfway between the city and the countryside. It was an intimate affair. Mama Kay from Makalani was there, sitting in the front row, crying into a handkerchief. Mr. Paul from the village supermarket was there, wearing his best suit, telling everyone he taught the groom everything he knew about hard work. Even Mrs. Gable, the landlady, was there. A. As Ethan stood at the altar, watching Diana walk down the aisle, he thought back to the bus ride out of the city. He thought of the dirty dishes, the betrayal by Tanya, the dusty roads of Okolona, and the moment he saved Anna from a soccer ball. He had left the city to find himself, expecting to find a simple life. Instead, he found a complex, messy, beautiful reality. He found a woman who was his equal in every way. In wealth, yes, but more importantly, in spirit. They had both run away from their golden cages only to find the key to freedom was in each other's hands. "I take you, Diana," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Rich or poor, in a mansion or a shack, as long as it's real." "As long as it's real," Diana echoed. As they kissed, the sun set over the garden, casting a golden glow not from coins or jewelry, but from the warmth of a journey that had come full circle. The billionaire's son had pretended to be poor to find true love, and in the end, he found the richest love of all.
So that was the plan all along? Tanya spun around, nearly dropping her phone. Her eyes went wide with panic as she saw the look on Ethan's face. "Ethan, I didn't see you there. Who are you talking to?" "Drop the act, Tanya," Ethan said, his voice deadly calm. "I heard everything. You knew who I was. You followed me here. You played me." Tanya's face shifted. The innocent, sweet girl dissolved, replaced by a sneering, cold stranger. Realizing she was caught, she crossed her arms and smirked. "So what if I did? You're the liar here, Ethan. Pretending to be a waiter. Please? I did what any smart woman would do. You should be thanking me for tolerating this poverty role play. It's exhausting pretending to like your cheap dates." "I was looking for something real," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. "I thought you were different." "Real doesn't buy Chanel bags," Tanya spat. "Grow up, Prince Charming. You need me. I'm the best you'll get in this dump." "I don't need anything from you," Ethan said, turning his back on her. "We're done. Don't ever come near me again." He walked away, ignoring her screaming insults as she realized her golden ticket was walking out the door. Ethan didn't even go back to finish his shift. He went straight to his apartment, packed his small bag, and left the key on the table. Makalani was tainted now. The betrayal stung more than he cared to admit, not because of the money, but because he had let his guard down. He had trusted her. As he walked to the bus station under the heavy grey sky, Ethan felt a new resolve hardening in his chest. He wouldn't go home. Not yet. Returning now would mean admitting defeat, admitting that his mother was right, that the world was only interested in his wealth. He looked at the departure board. He needed to go somewhere even more remote, somewhere where internet signals were weak and social climbers like Tanya wouldn't bother to look. He bought a ticket for a rural village deep in the countryside, a place that barely appeared on the map. As the bus engine roared to life, Ethan stared out the window at the receding lights of Makalani. He was bruised, yes, but he wasn't broken. His journey to find true love was far from over. In fact, the real test was just beginning. The bus rattled and groaned. The bus rattled and groaned as it finally hissed to a halt, kicking up a cloud of red dust that coated the roadside weeds. Ethan stepped off, shielding his eyes from the harsh afternoon sun. He was miles away from Makalani and light years away from the glittering skyscrapers of the capital. This was Okolona, a remote village where life moved at the speed of a grazing cow. The air here didn't smell of betrayal or exhaust fumes. It smelled of damp earth, burning wood, and silence. For Ethan, it was perfect. Dragging his battered suitcase, Ethan found lodging in a small whitewashed room rented out by a kindly widow named Mrs. Gable. It was humble, just a metal cot, a wooden table, and a mosquito net. But it was clean. As he unpacked his few shirts, Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders, a knot that had been tight since Tanya's betrayal, finally begin to loosen. Here, nobody cared about the Johnson Empire. Here, he was just a stranger with a heavy heart. His first order of business was survival. Ethan found work at the village's only supermarket, a cluttered but essential shop run by a jovial man named Mr. Paul. "You're hired," Mr. Paul said, handing him a green apron. "But don't expect excitement. We stock shelves, we sweep, and we listen to the village gossip. That's the job." It was mindless, repetitive work, and Ethan loved it. He found a strange rhythm in stacking cans of tomatoes and sweeping the dusty floors. However, he wasn't alone. He worked alongside Jude, a local boy about his age who was bursting with restless energy. Jude was the polar opposite of Ethan. While Ethan sought peace and simplicity, Jude was desperate to escape the village. "You're crazy for liking this place, Ethan," Jude said one afternoon as they restocked the rice aisle. "Look at me. I'm wasting my youth here. My dream? I want to go to the big city. I want to find a rich woman, maybe a widow or an heiress, who will take me away from this dust. I'd do anything for a taste of the high life." Ethan paused, a can of beans in his hand. "Be careful what you wish for, Jude. The high life isn't always what it looks like from the outside. Sometimes it's just a golden cage." Jude scoffed, shaking his head. "Easy for you to say. You don't have ambition. Me? I'd sell my soul for a sports car." Ethan didn't argue. He knew Jude wouldn't understand, but Jude wasn't the only one watching Ethan. Enter Julia. In a village where most people wore simple cotton clothes and walked or rode bicycles, Julia was a peacock. She was the village's resident tycoon, a woman in her 30s who had made a small fortune importing foreign goods. She owned the largest house in Okolona, a gaudy four-bedroom bungalow painted a bright, screaming pink, and she drove the only SUV in the district. Julia was used to getting what she wanted, and when she walked into the supermarket and saw the new salesboy with the chiseled jawline and the mysterious eyes, she decided she wanted Ethan. It started subtly. She would come in daily to buy things she didn't need, lingering at the counter to flaunt her expensive jewelry and heavy perfume. "You're too handsome to be sweeping floors," she purred one afternoon, leaning over the counter so Ethan could see the gold chain around her neck. "A man like you needs opportunities. I could give you a job at my warehouse. Air conditioning, better pay, private meetings." Ethan kept his expression polite but distant. "I'm happy where I am, ma'am. Thank you." The rejection only fueled her obsession. Julia wasn't used to hearing no, especially not from poor village boys. One evening, she waited for him outside the shop as he closed up. "Walk me home," she commanded, not asking. "I have a heavy bag." Ethan, being a gentleman, agreed to carry the bag, but stopped at her gate. Julia turned to him, her eyes hungry. "Come inside, Ethan. I've cooked dinner. I have a generator, so the AC is running. We can drink wine. You look tired of living like a pauper. Let me take care of you. I can change your life." The offer was clear. She wasn't just offering dinner. She was offering to be his sugar mommy, to keep him as a trophy just as Tanya had planned to use him as a bank account. The parallel sickened him. Ethan set the bag down firmly. "Julia, you're a successful woman, and I respect that, but I'm not for sale. I don't want your wine, your money, or your care. I want to make my own way." Julia's face twisted in humiliation. "You're an idiot," she hissed, her pride wounded. "You think you're better than me? You're just a shelf stocker. You'll regret this when you're eating dry bread in your shack." "I prefer the dry bread," Ethan said calmly, turning and walking away into the dark. He walked home that night feeling a mix of pride and exhaustion. Was this it? Was he destined to only meet people who viewed relationships as transactions? Jude wanted a rich wife. Julia wanted a trophy husband. Was there no one who just wanted a partner? Fate answered him the very next day. It was a Saturday, market day. The village square was a chaotic explosion of noise, colour, and heat. Vendors shouted prices, chickens clucked in cages, and children ran wild through the stalls. Ethan had finished his shift and was walking through the crowd, enjoying the anonymity. Suddenly, a shout rang out. "Watch out!" A group of boys were playing football near the road. One of them had kicked the ball with too much force. It soared through the air, arcing straight toward a woman who was distracted, checking a clipboard near a construction site. She was standing precariously close to a drainage ditch. Instinct kicked in. Ethan bolted. He didn't think. He just moved. He sprinted across the dusty gap, lunging forward just as the ball whistled past. He grabbed the woman by the waist, pulling her back from the edge of the ditch and spinning her around to shield her from the impact of the crowd. They collided with a soft thud, Ethan taking the brunt of the fall against a wooden stall, holding her steady in his arms. For a moment, the world stopped. The noise of the market faded into a dull buzz. Ethan looked down. The woman in his arms was breathless, her eyes wide with shock. She wasn't dressed like Julia. She wore a faded blue work shirt, dusty jeans, and heavy work boots. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, escaping in frizzy strands around her face. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, no perfume. Just the scent of sun and soap. But her eyes. They were deep, intelligent, and kind. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice rough from the adrenaline. He realized he was still holding her tight, his hand resting on the small of her back. The woman blinked, regaining her composure. She looked up at him, and a flush of red crept up her neck. I think so. That came out of nowhere. Thank you. You saved me from a broken ankle." Ethan gently helped her stand upright, reluctantly letting her go. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Anna," she replied, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm, her palm slightly rough, the hand of a worker. "I'm the accountant for the new telecommunications project down the road." "An accountant who stands in the middle of a football pitch?" Ethan teased, a genuine smile breaking across his face for the first time in months. Anna laughed, a bright, unpretentious sound that hit Ethan straight in the chest. "Guilty as charged. I get lost in the numbers sometimes." She looked at him, really looked at him. There was no calculation in her gaze. She didn't look at his shoes to see if they were expensive. She didn't glance at his watch. She just saw him. "Well, Ethan," she said, dusting off her jeans, "since you saved my life, or at least my dignity, let me buy you a drink. Not alcohol, just a cold soda. It's sweltering out here." Ethan hesitated. The last time a woman invited him for a meal, it had led to the worst heartbreak of his life. But as he looked at Anna, sweaty, dusty, and smiling with zero expectation, he felt a strange flutter in his chest. "A cold soda sounds perfect," Ethan said. They sat on plastic chairs under a rusted tin roof at a roadside stall. For the next hour, they didn't talk about money. They didn't talk about status. Anna complained about the heat and the stubborn construction workers. Ethan told funny stories about the customers at the supermarket. He learned that Anna was hardworking, living in the small village hotel, and focused on her job. She seemed simple, grounded, and utterly uninterested in the superficial. As the sun began to set, painting the village in hues of orange and purple, Ethan walked her back to the construction site. "I'll see you around, hero?" Anna asked, tilting her head. "You will," Ethan promised. As he walked back to his small room that night, Ethan felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He thought of Julia and her pink mansion, and then he thought of Anna in her dusty boots. There was no comparison. He didn't know yet that Anna was hiding a secret just as big as his own. He didn't know that the woman he had just saved was actually Diana Adams, a tech billionaire fleeing her own golden cage. All he knew was that for the first time since leaving his father's house, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was looking forward. But in the shadows of the village, eyes were watching. Jude's envy was simmering, and Julia's rejection was turning into a bitter grudge. The peace Ethan found was fragile, and the test of his new life was only just beginning. The days in Okolona turned into weeks, and for Ethan, they were the happiest he had known in years. His relationship with Anna blossomed like a wildflower in the dusty village soil, resilient, natural, and beautiful. They fell into a comfortable, intimate routine. After Ethan's shift at the supermarket and Anna's long hours at the construction site, they would meet by the riverbank. There, under the shade of ancient baobab trees, they shared cheap street food, roasted corn and spicy plantains, and talked about everything and nothing. Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. With Tanya, he had always felt like he was performing a role. With Anna, he was just himself. She didn't care about his past or his lack of money. She loved his humor, his quiet strength, and the way he listened to her. "You're different from the men here," Anna said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in violent shades of orange. She rested her head on his shoulder. "You don't chase status. You're content." "I've learned that peace is expensive," Ethan replied, stroking her hair, "and status is often just a heavy costume." But while their love grew in the quiet corners of the village, a storm of jealousy was brewing in the center of town. Jude, Ethan's co-worker, was consumed by bitterness. He couldn't understand it. In his eyes, Ethan was a fool. Ethan had the attention of Julia, the richest woman in the village, yet he chose Anna, a dusty construction worker with calloused hands. Jude, who would have given his right arm for Julia's attention, felt insulted by Ethan's choices. "You're throwing away a golden ticket," Jude sneered one afternoon as they swept the shop floor. "Julia could give you a house, a car, a life of ease. And you choose her? That accountant girl? What can she offer you? A lifetime of poverty?" "She offers me respect, Jude," Ethan said calmly, not breaking his rhythm. "Something money can't buy." Jude spat on the floor. "Respect doesn't fill your belly. You'll regret this." Meanwhile, Julia was spiraling. Her ego had taken a massive hit when Ethan rejected her for Anna. She was the queen of Okolona, accustomed to being the envy of every woman and the desire of every man. To be discarded for a nobody was unacceptable. She decided she needed to humiliate Ethan, to make him see what he was missing. But before Julia could execute her petty revenge, her own house of cards began to crumble. Jude, desperate to win Julia over now that Ethan was out of the picture, decided to make his move. He went to her pink bungalow one evening, flowers in hand, ready to confess his feelings. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding. Julia opened it, looking disheveled and stressed. When she saw Jude, she frowned. "What do you want?" "I wanted to talk," Jude stammered. "About us. I know you liked Ethan, but he's blind. I'm here. I've always admired you, Julia. I can be the man you need." Julia let out a harsh, cruel laugh. "You? You're just a shop boy. Ethan had class, even if he was poor. You're just common." Jude's heart shattered, but before he could respond, a heavy fist pounded on the open door. A man pushed past Jude. It was Mark, a local moneylender known for his short temper. "Julia!" Mark roared, his face red with rage. "Time is up!" Julia's face went pale. "Mark, please, not now. I have company." "I don't care who is here," Mark shouted, causing neighbors to peek out of their windows. "You promised to pay me back last week. You borrowed huge sums to buy those fake designer bags in that car, just to show off. You even slept with me to extend the deadline, you shameless woman. Pay me now, or I take the car." Jude stood frozen, the flowers dropping from his hand. The illusion of Julia, the wealthy, untouchable queen, shattered instantly. She wasn't rich. She was drowning in debt. She wasn't classy. She was manipulative. She was a fraud. You're broke?" Jude whispered, his voice trembling with disgust. "And you used your body to get loans?" Julia glared at him, her mask gone. "Get out! All of you! Get out!" Jude turned and ran, his dreams of a wealthy life dissolving into the night. He had spent so much energy envying Ethan for rejecting Julia, only to realize Ethan had dodged a bullet. Ethan had seen the truth that Jude was too blinded by greed to see. Julia's wealth was a hollow shell. With Julia exposed and shamed, the village gossip shifted. But Ethan paid it no mind. His focus was entirely on Anna. However, all things must come to an end. A few weeks later, the telecommunications project was completed. The heavy machinery was being packed onto trucks, and the workers were preparing to leave. Ethan went to the construction site to meet Anna, his heart heavy. He knew this day was coming. He planned to ask her to stay, or perhaps he would finally tell her the truth about himself and take her away. When he arrived, the site was chaotic. Workers were loading crates, shouting instructions. Ethan scanned the crowd for Anna's messy bun and blue work shirt. He stopped a passing foreman. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Anna, the accountant." The foreman looked at him, confused. "Anna? We don't have an accountant named Anna." Ethan frowned. "Yes, you do. She's been here for months. Tall, kind eyes, always checking the clipboards." The foreman's eyes widened in realization, and he let out a nervous chuckle. "Oh, you mean the boss? You mean Miss Adams?" "Miss Adams?" Ethan repeated, the name sounding familiar but wrong in this context. "Yeah, buddy, that's not an accountant. That's Diana Adams, the owner of the company. She likes to oversee the rural projects personally to make sure the quality's good. She's the one signing the checks." Ethan felt the ground beneath him sway. Diana Adams. The name crashed into his mind like a lightning bolt. Diana Adams was the tech billionaire, the tech queen of the city. And more importantly, she was the woman his parents had been trying to set him up with for years. The woman he had refused to meet because he thought she would be just another spoiled, arrogant heiress. He stood there, paralyzed, as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the site. The door opened, and out stepped Anna. But she looked different. She was wearing a sharp, tailored blazer over her jeans. Her posture was commanding. Workers stepped aside respectfully as she walked. She spotted Ethan standing by the gate, looking pale. Her expression softened, and she dismissed her assistants, walking over to him. "Ethan?" she said softly. "Or is it Diana?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't angry, just stunned. She winced, reaching out to take his hand. "I wanted to tell you. I was going to tell you today." "You're a billionaire," Ethan stated, looking at her dusty boots. "You own this entire company. You're Diana Adams." "Yes," she admitted, looking him in the eye. "And I'm sorry I lied. But Ethan, please understand. Back in the city, men only look at me and see dollar signs. They see my company, my inheritance, my status. Nobody ever looks at me. When I came here, I just wanted to be Anna. I wanted to see if I could make a connection with someone who didn't know who I was." She squeezed his hand, her eyes pleading. "And I found you. You fell in love with Anna, the poor accountant. You saved me. You fed me. You cared for me when you thought I had nothing. That means more to me than any merger or stock option." Ethan stared at her, a bubble of laughter rising in his throat. It was ironic. It was perfect. She had done exactly what he had done. She was running from the same gilded cage. She was searching for the same authenticity. How could he be angry? He was currently lying to her about being Ethan Johnson. "I understand," Ethan said finally, a genuine smile returning to his face. "Believe me, I understand more than you know." Diana let out a breath she had been holding. "Thank you. I was so afraid you'd hate me." "I could never hate you," Ethan said. "Then come with me," Diana said urgently. "The project is done. I have to go back to the city. Come with me, Ethan. Leave this village. I don't care if you work at a supermarket or if you do nothing at all. I have enough for both of us. I just want you." Ethan looked at the village that had been his sanctuary. He looked at the dusty road where he had rejected Julia. He looked at Jude in the distance, sweeping the shop floor with slumped shoulders. Then he looked at Diana, the woman his parents wanted him to marry, the woman he had accidentally fallen in love with while running away from her. Fate had a twisted sense of humor. Okay, Ethan said, making a decision. He would go back. He would face the city. But he wasn't ready to reveal his own secret just yet. He wanted to see how this played out. He wanted to see if her world, their world, would accept him as Ethan the poor orphan before they knew he was Ethan the heir. I'll come with you, he whispered. Let's go to the city. Diana beamed, pulling him into a hug. As they embraced, Ethan looked over her shoulder at the horizon. He was returning to the lion's den, to the world of elites and judgment. But this time, he wasn't alone. However, he knew the hardest part was yet to come. Soon, he would meet her parents. And he had a sinking feeling that Mr. and Mrs. Adams would not be as understanding about a poor village boy dating their billionaire daughter as Diana was. The ultimate test of their love and his patience was waiting in the skyscrapers of the capital. His ride back to the capital was a blur of highway lights and silence. As the sleek black SUV glided into the city limits, the rustic piece of Okolona felt like a distant dream. The skyscrapers rose like steel giants, blocking out the stars, reminding Ethan of the life he had run away from. Diana sat beside him, clutching his hand tightly. She was no longer Anna, the carefree construction manager in dusty boots. She was Diana Adams, the heiress, and the closer they got to her family's estate, the more the weight of her reality seemed to press down on her shoulders. My parents, they can be intense, Diana warned, her voice tight. They have certain expectations, but I don't care what they say. I love you, Ethan. I can handle them, Ethan said, squeezing her hand. He meant it. After all, he had been raised by James and Mary Johnson. He knew exactly how the elite operated. He knew their language, their posturing, and their cold calculations. What he wasn't prepared for was the sheer force of their disdain. The car pulled up to the Adams estate, a sprawling mansion that screamed, "Old money." Iron gates swung open, revealing a driveway lined with imported Italian cypress trees. Servants were waiting at the entrance to take their bags. Ethan stepped out, carrying only his battered duffel bag from the village. In the pristine marble foyer, he looked out of place, a rugged anomaly in a world of polished perfection. Waiting for them in the grand drawing room were Mr. and Mrs. Adams. Mr. Robert Adams was a tall, imposing man with greying hair and eyes like flint. Mrs. Eleanor Adams was elegant, draped in silk, with a gaze that could freeze water. They looked at Diana with relief, but when their eyes landed on Ethan, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mom, Dad, Diana said, stepping forward. This is Ethan, the man I told you about. Mrs. Adams didn't offer a hand. She simply scanned Ethan from his worn-out sneakers to his simple cotton shirt, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she smelled something unpleasant. So, she said, her voice dripping with skepticism, this is the construction worker? He worked at the supermarket in the village, actually, Diana corrected, her chin lifted in defiance. And he saved my life. Mr. Adams let out a dry, dismissive scoff. A supermarket shelf stacker, charming. He walked over to a crystal decanter and poured himself a drink, not offering one to Ethan. Diana, we expected you to have a little fun in the countryside. Get this rebellion out of your system. We did not expect you to bring a stray puppy home. Robert, Diana snapped. Ethan is my boyfriend. Show some respect. Respect is earned, Diana, Mr. Adams retorted, turning to face them. And in this world, respect is earned through lineage, success, and capital. Tell me, young man. He addressed Ethan directly for the first time, his tone mocking. Where are you from? Who are your people? I'm an orphan, sir, Ethan replied calmly, meeting the older man's gaze without flinching. I have no people. I've made my own way. An orphan, Mrs. Adams repeated, sharing a look of pure horror with her husband. No family, no connections, no assets. And you think you're fit to stand beside our daughter? I love her, Ethan said simply. That should be enough. Mrs. Adams laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Love? Oh, you poor, naive boy. Love doesn't secure mergers. Love doesn't maintain stock prices. Diana has a destiny. We have been in talks with the Johnson family for months. They have a son, Ethan Johnson. He is the heir to the largest empire in the country. That is who Diana is meant to marry. Ethan felt a jolt in his chest. It was surreal. They were rejecting him in favor of him. The irony was so thick, it nearly choked him. He wanted to scream, "I am Ethan Johnson." He wanted to pull out his ID, call his father, and watch their faces crumble. But he held back. If he revealed himself now, they would only accept him because of his name. He needed them, and Diana, to see the ugliness of their prejudice first. I'm not interested in the Johnson heir, Diana argued, stepping between Ethan and her parents. I've never even met him. He's probably some arrogant, spoiled brat who thinks he can buy a wife. I want Ethan. Real Ethan. You are being a child, Mr. Adams roared, slamming his glass down. You will marry who we say you will marry. This peasant is a distraction, a temporary lapse in judgment. The argument escalated, leaving Ethan standing in the crossfire, silent and observant. That night, he was relegated to a guest room in the servants' wing, a deliberate slight to put him in his place. The next morning, the real attack began. Ethan received a text message from Mrs. Adams. Meet me at the Lux Cafe at 10 a.m. alone. Do not tell Diana. Ethan arrived at the cafe, a high-end establishment where the coffee cost more than a day's wage in Okolona. Mrs. Adams was already seated, looking immaculate and terrifying. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'll get straight to the point, she said, as Ethan sat down. She reached into a Hermes handbag and pulled out a thick white envelope. She slid it across the marble table. Ethan stared at it. What is this? It's $50,000, Mrs. Adams said, her voice devoid of emotion. Cash, untraceable. It's more money than you would make in 10 years stacking shelves in that village. Ethan looked up at her, his expression hardening. You're trying to pay me off? I'm trying to help you, Mrs. Adams said condescendingly. Look at you. You don't belong here. You don't know which fork to use at dinner. You don't know how to speak to our associates. You will only embarrass Diana and drag her down. Take the money, leave the city, and start a little business somewhere far away. Find a nice village girl who is on your level. And if I refuse? Mrs. Adams leaned forward, her eyes narrowing into slits. Then we will make your life miserable. We will ensure you never find a decent job in this city. We will cut Diana off from her inheritance. Do you want to be the reason she loses everything? Do you want her to hate you for making her poor? The threat hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Ethan felt a wave of nausea. This was the world he had run away from. A world where people were commodities, where affection was bought and sold, where a mother would bribe a stranger to control her daughter's life. He looked at the envelope. $50,000. To the old Ethan, it was pocket change. To the poor orphan Ethan, it was a fortune. But to the man who loved Diana, it was an insult. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan pushed the envelope back across the table. I don't want your money, Mrs. Adams, Ethan said, his voice quiet but steely. You can keep it. You can keep your status, your mansions, and your threats. But you cannot buy me. I love Diana. And unlike you, I think she's strong enough to make her own choices. Mrs. Adams looked stunned. She had never encountered a poor man who refused money. Her shock quickly turned to fury. She snatched the envelope back. You are a fool, she hissed. You think this is a fairy tale? You think love conquers all? You will regret this. When Diana is crying because she has lost her status, remember this moment. You are nothing. You are a nobody. You will never be Ethan Johnson. You're right, Ethan said, standing up. I'll never be the man you think Ethan Johnson is. He walked out of the cafe. his heart pounding against his ribs. He felt a strange mixture of anger and clarity. He had passed the test. He had refused the bribe. But he also realized that he couldn't keep this charade going. If he stayed as poor Ethan, he would destroy Diana's relationship with her family. He would force her to choose between him and her heritage. And while Diana was willing to do that, Ethan knew it wasn't fair. He had the power to fix this. He had the power to shut Mrs. Adams up instantly. He needed to end the lie. Walking down the bustling city street, Ethan pulled out his phone. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed a number he hadn't called in months. The phone rang twice before a warm, familiar voice answered. "Hello? Mom," Ethan said, his voice cracking with emotion. "It's me." "Ethan," Mrs. Mary Johnson exclaimed on the other end, her voice filled with relief. "Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm in the city, Mom," Ethan said, taking a deep breath. "I'm back." "You're back? Does that mean... Did you find what you were looking for?" "I did," Ethan said, looking up at the sky. "I found her. I found a woman who loves me when I have nothing. Her name is Diana." "Diana?" Mrs. Johnson paused. "Wait, not Diana Adams?" "The very same." Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "Fate is funny, isn't it? But, Mom, it's complicated. Her parents, they hate me. They think I'm a gold digger. They think I'm a peasant. They just tried to bribe me to leave her so she can marry Ethan Johnson." "Oh dear," Mrs. Johnson sighed. "That sounds like Eleanor Adams. She always was dramatic." "I can't do this anymore, Mom," Ethan said, his voice hardening with resolve. "I can't let them treat me like dirt, and I can't let Diana fight her family for a lie. I need to tell them. I need to tell everyone." "So you're ready to come home?" his mother asked gently. "Yes," Ethan said, "but I want to do it my way. Is the annual charity auction still happening tomorrow night?" "It is. We are the main sponsors, as always." "Good," Ethan said, a plan forming in his mind. "I'll be there, and I'm bringing Diana. It's time for the Adams family to meet the real Ethan Johnson." "We will be waiting, son," Mrs. Johnson said, pride evident in her tone. "Make us proud." Ethan hung up the phone. The game was over. He wasn't running anymore. He was going to walk into the lion's den, not as the victim, but as the king returning to his throne. Mrs. Adams wanted a billionaire son-in-law. She was about to get exactly what she wished for, and it was going to be the most humiliating moment of her life. The evening of the grand charity auction arrived, draping the city in a veil of twilight and anticipation. The venue was the Royal Hall, a gilded masterpiece of architecture where the city's elite gathered to flaunt their wealth under the guise of philanthropy. Rolls-Royces and Bentleys lined the curb, depositing women in diamonds and men in tuxedos. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in the guest room of the Adams estate. He was fastening the cufflinks of a tuxedo he had kept hidden in his bag, a Tom Ford custom fit that cost more than Mrs. Gable's entire house in the village. Diana walked in, looking breathtaking in an emerald silk gown, but her face was etched with worry. She saw Ethan and paused, her eyes widening. "Wow," she breathed. "You look incredible. Where did you rent that suit? It fits perfectly." Ethan turned, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. "I have a few tricks up my sleeve, Diana. Are you ready?" "I'm nervous," she admitted, smoothing his lapel. "My parents are going to be unbearable tonight. They're obsessed with impressing the Johnson family. They heard the Johnsons are making a special appearance. If my parents say anything mean to you, we leave. Promise?" "I promise," Ethan said, kissing her forehead. "But trust me, tonight is going to be unforgettable." The ride to the venue was tense. Mr. and Mrs. Adams ignored Ethan completely, too busy discussing strategy on how to corner Mr. James Johnson for a business introduction. When they arrived, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi blinded them. Ethan stepped out, looking comfortable and commanding in the spotlight, a natural grace that confused Mrs. Adams. "Try not to look so lost," Mrs. Adams hissed at Ethan as they entered the ballroom. Just stand in the back and don't touch the hors d'oeuvres. You're only here because Diana insisted. The ballroom was a sea of luxury. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, and the air buzzed with the chatter of millions of dollars changing hands. Ethan stood silently by Diana's side, enduring the judgmental stares of her parents' friends. "Is this the charity case?" one socialite whispered loudly to Mrs. Adams. "Temporary insanity on Diana's part," Mrs. Adams replied with a tight smile, loud enough for Ethan to hear. Ethan checked his watch. It was time. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight swung to the center stage. The chatter died down as the host, a famous news anchor, approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice boomed, "welcome to the Night of Giving. We have a very special surprise this evening. We are honored to be joined by the city's most generous benefactors, the pillars of our economy. Please welcome Mr. James and Mrs. Mary Johnson." Thunderous applause filled the room. Mr. and Mrs. Adams clapped enthusiastically, craning their necks to see. "And," the host continued, pausing for dramatic effect, "for the first time in 3 years, making a rare public appearance to announce a new foundation, their son and sole heir, Ethan Johnson." The doors to the VIP backstage area opened. James and Mary Johnson walked out, waving to the crowd. But they didn't stop at the podium. They looked down into the crowd. James Johnson leaned into the microphone. "Thank you. But before we begin, I'd like to invite my son up here. He's been away on a sabbatical, learning how the real world works." James locked eyes with Ethan across the room. He smiled and beckoned. Ethan felt Diana's hand tighten around his arm. "Where is he?" she whispered, looking around. "I don't see anyone." Ethan gently pried Diana's fingers off his arm. He turned to her, his eyes soft and apologetic. "Forgive me, Diana. I have one last secret." He stepped away from her. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Mrs. Adams hissed, grabbing his sleeve. "Get back here. You're embarrassing us. That's the stage for the Johnson family." Ethan calmly removed Mrs. Adams's hand from his jacket. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for him. A hush fell over the room. The sound of his dress shoes clicking on the marble floor was the only thing audible. He walked with a confidence that radiated power. He walked not like a waiter, not like a shelf stacker, but like a king. He climbed the stairs to the stage. Mrs. Adams let out a gasp that sounded like a dying animal. Mr. Adams dropped his champagne glass. It shattered, but nobody looked at the mess. All eyes were on the stage. Ethan stood between his parents. His mother kissed his cheek. His father clapped him on the shoulder. Ethan leaned into the microphone, his voice smooth and deep. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Ethan Johnson." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, and shocks rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Ethan looked directly at the Adams family. He saw Mr. Adams clutching his chest, looking as if he were having a heart attack. He saw Mrs. Adams pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, realizing she had tried to bribe the richest man in the room with $50,000, money he probably made in interest every hour. But then Ethan looked at Diana. She wasn't looking at his money. She was staring at him with wide, shocked eyes, her hands covering her mouth. "I spent the last few months," Ethan continued, addressing the crowd but speaking only to her, "living a life without my name. I wanted to know if I could be loved for who I am, not for what I have. I worked as a waiter, I stacked shelves, and I found something more valuable than all the assets in this room." He stepped off the stage and walked back toward Diana. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He stopped in front of her. The silence was deafening. "You're Ethan Johnson," Diana whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "And you're Diana Adams," Ethan smiled. "We're quite a pair of liars, aren't we?" "You let my mother try to bribe you," she laughed, a tear escaping. "You let my father call you a peasant." "I needed to know you would choose me without the title," Ethan said softly. "And you did. You stood up for the poor orphan. That's how I know you're the one. Diana threw her arms around his neck, and Ethan spun her around. The room broke into applause, some genuine, some simply sycophantic. But neither of them cared. In the corner, Mr. and Mrs. Adams were shrinking into the wallpaper. Ethan approached them, Diana by his side. Mrs. Adams looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Ethan, Mr. Johnson, I, we, we didn't know. We were just testing you, Mr. Adams lied, sweating profusely, to see if you had grit. Ethan looked at them with a cool, detached expression. Mrs. Adams, you offered me money to leave your daughter. You called me worthless. I don't need your approval, and I certainly don't need your $50,000. He paused, letting the shame settle on them. But, Ethan continued, you are Diana's parents. So, for her sake, we will be civil, but never disrespect me, or my wife, again. Wife? Diana looked at him, raising an eyebrow. Ethan grinned, pulling a ring box from his pocket, a simple ring he had bought with his wages from the supermarket. I was going to ask the poor accountant Anna, but I suppose the billionaire Diana will do. Will you marry me? Yes, Diana beamed. 1,000 times yes.
6 months later. The wedding was not held in a grand cathedral or a stuffy ballroom. It was held in a garden halfway between the city and the countryside. It was an intimate affair. Mama Kay from Makalani was there, sitting in the front row crying into a handkerchief. Mr. Paul from the village supermarket was there, wearing his best suit, telling everyone he taught the groom everything he knew about hard work. Even Mrs. Gable, the landlady, was there. Of course, the elite were there too. Mr. and Mrs. Adams sat quietly, humble and behaved, knowing they were lucky to be invited at all. As Ethan stood at the altar watching Diana walk